when I think about diversity, it's the typical things that we go to immediately are what are the gender in the room? What's the ethnicity? What's the race? But it's so much deeper than that. Religious denominations come into what we think about of diversity, but also I think what's important is the range of ages that we have in our complex that makes us very diverse. We have folks coming in straight out of high school, straight out of college, and we routinely pin people with a 40-year pin or so, and you know that they didn't start when they were 5. So we have a wide range of age, we have different marital status, where people come from, their socioeconomic background. Somebody that comes from a farming family in Logan and somebody that was raised in a skyrise apartment in Salt Lake City. We have a wide variety of diversity. So that's what I think of when I think about diversity. And then when it comes to inclusion, we've had so many great definitions thus far from Doc Hamrick and Colonel Carroll and Colonel Boring. And Colonel Boring said it great, diversity is who all's been asked to the dance or to the party, and then who's actually asked to dance is the inclusion, and are they or are they not? And in my mind, inclusion really means when you have everybody coming together to solve a problem across this complex, and we are a complex of problem solvers, is everybody's voice being heard? Are we asking for their input? And when we get it, do we value it? And that's what I think of as inclusion.
Thank you, ma'am. You're so correct, because even in my time in this position, I have realized that diversity means way more than any of us believe, to include myself. Some of the things to add to that is your work style. We don't all have the same work style. And diversity talks about your work style. And so we bring different ones to the table. And the inclusion piece, well, I believe that's where our power resides. If we take into consideration a little bit of what everyone brings to the table and don't hinder or disregard, that is so awesome. So that being said, we talked about in our last seminar diversity and how it affects productivity. So firstly, what are your thoughts about what our overall workforce could be doing right now to further and advance diversity and inclusion? Secondly, why does it really matter in our endpoints?
Thanks, Denise. So I think one of the things that there's several things that we're doing, both from an institution, from the complex perspective. When we talk about diversity, we are certainly looking at who we recruit and how we recruit them, where we go to try to get a diverse workforce. Then as we recruit and we find people who are interested and we're doing hiring, we want to make sure that we are covering all the bases that, for example, our hiring panels match the diverse workforce that we're hiring into. So that's kind of an institutional process piece, things that we're doing for diversity. But I think also recognizing through our sensing sessions, which kind of talks to diversity, but it also talks to inclusion. What we're finding out in these sensing sessions is so fantastic. It talks to what you said about different work styles. You may have 3 people that look fairly identical. They may all be 50-year-olds, they all may be 50-year-old males, and they may be all 50-year-old white males standing or sitting right next to each other. But they all come from a totally different perspective because of how they were raised, perhaps, or where they grew up. What type of work style do they like? We get different opinions on a lot of things from the folks who work swing shift versus the folks who work day shift. But what's important is that in those sensing sessions, people are listening, and you can't unhear someone's story. And I just love that. I have learned so much from these sensing sessions to see how we are a diverse workforce. We need to work harder in our inclusion piece for sure, but that's been a great part of these sensing sessions.
Ma'am, I'm so glad that you mentioned the sensing sessions, because No, my platform is everyone has a story, and we need to hear everyone's story. So just what you said is allowing us as a workforce to get to know each other, get to know our backgrounds, our strengths, what we truly bring to the table, and not what someone may think or assume that we bring to the table. Now, we've been doing these seminars for a few weeks now, and it's no mystery that we are only capturing a small portion of our workforce, and we're probably capturing the same group of people. And we've enlisted the folks that are listening to pretty much advocate for diversity and inclusion. They are ambassadors. They're hearing, and we're asking that they hear and share. And so my question is, what would you offer as a recommendation to connect and expand our engagement message to the majority of our workforce?
Right. So I would ask that everybody who's offered the opportunity to come to a sensing session to do it. I promise you, no matter what you think before you go in, you will have a little bit different of perspective. Some people have a lot different, but for sure you're going to have a little bit different perspective just by listening to your teammates around the table and what their experience has been in this conversation and what they bring into it. So continuing the sensing session, and then of course, when you leave, tell somebody that hasn't been yet, right? And just to come do that experience. For people who are a little bit intimidated, perhaps, about starting a sensing session or being the lead of one, I promise you there is no one that was more intimidated than I was when I started. I think I've done about, I'm on 16 or 17, I'm not sure what the real number is right now. And I'm still nervous when I go in because I'm nervous now, not so much about what I'm going to say because I've gotten past that, talking about me, but I want to make sure that environment is comfortable for everybody in the room to say something. And so, so for the folks that are thinking about doing a sensing session, I would say just do it. It's okay. You know, it's really not as bad as you may think in the beginning. And so many people will walk out of there with a much better appreciation of what we're trying to get to after participating in this. So the main thing I would say is, you know, let's encourage each other to participate. And if you've heard, for example, another example is if you sat through a webinar and appreciated the conversation, if you've read a recent article that meant something to you, pass it to someone else. This is okay. If the subject is diversity and inclusion and you feel like it's worth sharing, first of all, send it to us because it's probably something, if we haven't read it, we would really like to, but share it with others. And I think that is a big thing. We're going to do more formal, not really sure if you would call it education or training, but the Air Force will give us more formal tools as we continue this journey. But for right now, just the conversation itself is a good thing.
Thank you, ma'am. And I want to reiterate that you said conversation. Sensing sessions are conversations. They are not training.
Not training.
They're actually a form of speed dating, you could say. I know a lot of people are familiar with that term. You're actually getting a chance to tell who you are and hear who other people are. And it is in that knowledge that we'll have our unity. I keep reiterating that Colonel Carroll said in her session that we are a tapestry. So we are all one airman. We are all fighting for the same goals and the same mission. So finally, under the banner of one airman, one goal, how do we get there? From here to there today.
So it's a journey, right? This is not a one and done. We've been very, very purposeful in making sure everybody knows it's not one sensing session, it's not 1 month, it's not one training tool that we're after. This is a journey. And I think how we get there is we are a tapestry. This Air Force, this complex that's so important to us is a tapestry, but we all share a couple of things. First, whether you're uniformed airmen or whether you're a civil service airman, when you start your service, you take an oath to the Constitution of the United States to support it so to support and defend the Constitution. So we all do that. We've all said that our job, our job, is more important than ourselves, and it's more important than a paycheck. We have sworn to this, and that binds us all. We share that. And another thing that we share is our core values, our Air Force core values. So integrity first, service before self, and excellence in all we do. And as you would expect, I guess, a general officer to go straight back to those core values, but they're real and they mean something in this discussion. Because if you are living by those core values and you are valuing your fellow airmen, whatever shape or form or size or talk or whatever that airman comes in, if you're living by the core values and you value that person, you value what they bring to our Air Force. So getting there is continuing to have the conversation. It's not being scared of saying, this is what I think, even if it's not what may or may not be the popular thing in your shop or in your room, in your sensing session. It's continuing to take that step in the conversation, living by your core values, really important. Because quite frankly, the opposite of inclusion is exclusion. And I will just say, there's a long list of organizations, states, nation states that live by exclusion, and they have gone the way of history. Nazi Germany, the Imperial Japan, ISIS. They make their communist USSR and the Cold War. There are examples after examples of historical organizations, countries that have led by exclusion. And none of them were successful. All of them have been defeated. And in the end, when we talk about why inclusion is important to Air Force, it is because what we live by and what makes us successful.
Thank you, ma'am. Could not have said it better. And our regulation for diversity and inclusion, the first sentence states under the definition of diversity that we do all of that in line with the Air Force core values and the Air Force mission. So we're not doing anything that we're not supposed to do. We're doing everything we are supposed to do in order to promote. Now, before we get to our last comments, are there any questions?
Well, there is one. One of the questions that came up was, one of the things we are trying to do is build advocacy, because we're not under any illusion that everyone that's hearing this message today are the people who are supposed to be hearing this message today. So the question is, if we're going to build advocacy, what message would you have for our advocates? What message could you share with our advocates to say, hey, if we're going to really grow and transform this culture, take this message with you. How could you? What would the message be?
Well, I would. Could we crowdsource that because it would be great. So I mean, the question is really, are we singing to the choir? When we're in the sensing sessions, are we doing that? And I would say absolutely that's what I would have thought going into them. But you can see people's facial expressions change. You can see their body language change. When someone who they think looks like them tells a story that's completely different. I mean, I have heard so many really stories that have stuck with me. So what's the message to the advocates? I think it's a gentle, hey, come with me to a sensing session. Or have you had this experience? Have you ever experienced it? It's those leading questions or the gentle, hey, let's go together to this, that moves it. And I will kick it back over to see if Mandy sees anything come up in the chat section, because I am all open for ideas. And it's really, truly a grassroots answer.
Yes, one question from a guy.
Okay, go ahead, Mandy. We're hearing you. Do you have a question?
Sorry, I didn't know my mic was on. Bless. All right, here we go. We have a question from the audience. Do you believe these conversations will also address gender inequalities, other social injustices among the many that need work?
It's a great question, and that often comes up in the sensing sessions too. I can see through my peripheral vision here. Denise is shaking her head. The common cliche is when the tide rises, all boats come up with it, right? And so that if we are talking about everyone having an equal opportunity to come to the table to share their voice, then absolutely that is part of the conversation. Denise, you want to add anything to that?
I know that our sensing sessions have started out with a particular topic in mind, being race, and race specifically to the Black or African American race, but we are going to come down the checklist. And what is our hope is that as we have these courageous conversations for one area, it makes it easier for the next, and then so on and so on. And we are going to come down that checklist. But when we start our unconscious bias training, a lot of things are going to come to light, and we'll already have changed our minds about how we handle things. So I can tell you that, yes, we are going to cover everything LGBTQ. We're going to cover age. We're going to cover disability. We're going to cover the way you work during COVID, because COVID was a culture that made us adapt the way we work. So all of these things fall under diversity and inclusion. Ron, is there another question?
Yes, there is. Our Air Force is not totally foreign to transformation. We have gone through so many iterations of change over the years. So the question is, and someone said it well in one of the other presentations where they said, if we look at D&I as a program, then it will fail. How can we actually package, or how can we communicate this as anything but a program? How do we do that with D&I?
I'd like to address it the same way that we address resilience. Resilience is a way of life. We said to be resilient is not an action, but it's actually a noun. Resilience is something that can be practiced and perfected. So we're saying the same thing with diversity and inclusion. We can learn what diversity looks like and operate in a manner where we do see everyone in their uniqueness. And then inclusion, we take in what they're saying. So it becomes more than a program. It becomes a way of living and operating so that we can accomplish the Air Force mission. Ma'am, would you like to add to that?
That's hard to add to. You got it. I think Denise has it. I think that's perfect. And I do share the concern of, we don't want it to be a checklist item for a commander's program, just another communicator that somebody runs down a checklist. We don't want it to be batched into some type of annual training requirement. I agree that may formalize what people see, but it's not grassroots. It's not something that truly sticks. And what does stick is what are we all talking about? And resilience is a perfect example, because we'll do some things under the cover, some formal things under the cover of resilience. But resilience is picnics. Resilience is sharing stories of survival, and giving ourselves the opportunity to do that.
Resilience is golfing and
yes,
skiing for
it
recharge.
It is for me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Very cool. All right. Well, back over to you. Any thoughts? Closing thoughts or takeaways?
Well, it is time for our takeaways, and of course, we're going to turn to our leader to share some action items for us. Now, what can we do? What can we do to live under that banner of one airman, one goal, and be successful? What are our action items?
So our action items, if you don't have them memorized by heart, I think we all do, is start in your mind thinking about, am I living by these core values? Do I really look at my coworkers with dignity and respect? Do I respect, if I am in a sea of 24-year-olds and there's one 65-year-old, is that person, is his or her voice equally as important? And then I would flip it the other way too. If we have people who have 30 years of doing a particular type of work or task a certain way, are you really receptive to the young person? If you are a sea of men and there's one female in the room, does she have the same voice? And is somebody in that room, the action is, has somebody in that room said, colleague, what do you think? And so those are small, tangible things that you can do. Coming to a sensing session is a tangible thing, action you can take to open up your mind to somebody else. And then grabbing somebody to come with you is something as well. And we will continue to push out webinars. We're going to continue to push out interesting articles to read, links to click on. Just make yourself, if you have a few minutes every day, if you have a few minutes once a week, take a look at that. I would say that. But most importantly, I think is just to go back to our core values that we're treating everybody with dignity and respect.
General Von Hoffen, I would love to thank you for all that you've done, not just today, but all the webinars that your folks have supported the D&I effort here on Hill Air Force Base. And thank you for sharing our call to action and for your listening out there. Mandy, Ron, back to you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And again, we were just so blessed to have our guests with us today. And as General Von Hoffman said, these are going to continue. So look into the very, very near future for more webinars. In fact, I believe we have Colonel Carroll coming back online, and she's going to refocus again on inclusion. She will actually get a little bit deeper with a little bit more breadth and depth on that particular subject. But there are also other awesome webinars coming up, Mandy, so would you mind sharing what those are?
You bet, Ron, and thank you again to everyone supporting us through, we're all adjusting still, learning microphones and social distancing, and making the best productions. So thank you even for the tips coming in and the nice comments from the chat box. Many people appreciate this effort, regardless of sound problems. So thank you both. Other webinars that are coming up, we have the Day in the Life of a Female Engineer on 8 October. We also have our In the Know series kicking off with Mr. Fox next week. So sharing good news across the OALC. We want to highlight what you GSUs are doing out there, all the neat things that we don't get to connect one another to enough. So join us next week for that. We'll be learning about the PRC2 program, which is Personnel Recovery, Command and Control. And then we will have an immigrant's resilience story coming up from Major Arcetta in October or November. That about wraps it up for me. I hope you all have a wonderful Air Force Day. Back to you all.
All right. And once again, thank you so much for joining in, and we will see you next time. God bless. Take care.